Welcome to the Bourbon Doctors. I'm Albert. Today we're flying solo, and I'm talking about Old Rip 10 Year. Happy New Year, guys. As you can see, I'm flying solo. You know, Christmas time is a great time to pick up new bottles of bourbon, and I got a bottle of Old Rip 10 Year, Old Rip Van Winkle from the Pappy Van Winkle lineup, from the BTAC collection. Got it just a couple days before Christmas, and I thought, this is a bottle I don't want to wait on. Let's open this up. Let's try this out. Let's introduce and share with you guys this fantastic bottle of bourbon that I was able to pick up. For those of you that don't know, the BTAC collection comes out once a year. They're highly allocated bottles and hard to get. I managed to pick this up a couple days before Christmas at its suggested retail price of $100. And, as you can see, I've already opened it. I've had a little sip out of it. It is really good bourbon. What you would expect from Buffalo Trace. At $100, is it worth it? Well, we could talk about that a little bit. But first I want to talk about the hunt and the chase and how people are going after these BTAC collection bottles or Buffalo Trace distillery bottles in general. There's just an incredible markup, and I really can't say, like, having had other bottles from the Pappy lineup, other bottles from the BTAC lineup, and I could say for the most part these are not worth the secondary market prices that people are asking and or paying. The same day that I managed to pick this bottle up for $100, I saw it on sale at another store for $899. $899. Now, let me tell you, the liquor store is getting this bottle for somewhere between $50 and $60. So that is a ridiculous upcharge on what's a good bottle of bourbon. It's good. Don't get me wrong. I don't love most of the offerings from Buffalo Trace, the distillery, right? They're good bourbons. I've pretty much sampled the vast majority of them. I've had bottles from most of the offerings of the distillery. They're good bourbons. They're not $1,000 good. They're just not. And I can say that this bottle is certainly not that. It's not worth $1,000. Now, is it a good bottle? You bet. How do we usually treat our good bottles here on the Bourbon Doctors? Well, we blind them and see how they compare, right, to something else that maybe is a little bit more readily available, something else that's pretty similar in price, content, whatever. So I struggled a little bit with this, and I thought, well, what's a good blind for Old Rip 10 Year? It's a wheated bourbon, right, 107 proof. And my first thought was, there's Weller 107, but that's the same mash bill. That's the same distillery. It's also allocated. It's probably not a great blind, right? My next thought was this bottle. Old Fitz, wheated bourbon out of Heaven Hill. This is bottled in bond, so it's 100 proof, but it's aged much longer. This bottle's aged 17 years. I thought, boy, is that a good comparison? I mean, it's certainly a heavy hitter from Heaven Hill versus a heavy hitter from Buffalo Trace. But honestly, my next thought was like, all right, does anyone really care about two super highly allocated bottles that are super hard to get? Is that a great blind idea? So I passed on that idea. And I thought, what's a wheated bourbon that, is easy to get, that's good, that's delicious, that I enjoy, and that maybe would compare well, or maybe not well, who knows, but is something that people could go out and get? And my thought? Maker's Mark Cask Strength, right? Readily available, delicious, and available for $40. Now, all things being equal, right? This is Old Rip Van Winkle. For God's sakes, this should wipe the floor with a $40 bottle of bourbon. But, as the bourbon junkies say, the proof is in the pour, right? What better way than to blind them up? But then I thought, well, why stop there, right? I like Maker's Cask Strength, but what I really like more This maker's 46 cask strength. Now, both of these are aged about 6 years. This one's with French oak staves. And I think this one is 110 proof. This one's 112. So they're pretty comparable in terms of proof. They're all wheated bourbons. It's just the aging process. It's a little bit different. Of course, the mash bills are slightly different. No one really knows what exactly the mash bill is for Pappy. We just know it's wheated. But, these are aged about 6 years. This is aged about 10 years. Does that 4 years and $40 or maybe more, maybe $760 or $740 make a big difference? And you know what? That's what we're going to find out today. We're going to go to a blind. We'll taste all three. I'll give you my thoughts, and we'll go from there. All right, welcome back. We got three pretty similar pours. I don't really know what order they're in. I obviously know that each one is one of those three, but don't know the order. We'll see if we can pick them out. And if you've made it this far in the video, if you like our content, please press the like button, hit the subscribe button. Most of you are not subscribed if you're watching. It really helps us out and lets us continue to make this channel go forward. I recognize that our release schedule has been a little bit funky as of late due to Chad's move to Iowa, another state away. But we're working hard at trying to figure the things out and try to get you guys some more regular content. Maybe sometimes that just means it's going to be more of just me talking in a room. We'll see. All right, let's get to it, right? All right, number one. All right, so right off the bat, this gives me warm bread. You really get a lot of that wheat up front. Maybe, boy, just a tiny bit of oak, but not much. Maybe that's a little bit of licorice, which is an odd one, but that's what I got. Oh, a little oak, a little cherry. That's really delicious. It's a little thin on the mouthfeel. It's not real syrupy. It's got a touch of heat, but not bad, not in a bad way. And it lasts. It's got a decent finish. Boy, and with each sip, you just get a little bit more complexity, a little bit more out of that pour. That number one is a really, really solid pour. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to number two. All right, number two. Much more muted on the nose. And you guys know, if you watch us, my nose is terrible. It just is, man. It is what it is. I think, a lot of people watch the YouTubers and talk to the whiskey experts, and they frequently tell me, like, oh, man, I just don't get all these things on the nose. I don't get strawberry shortcake. I don't get, dark fruit. I don't get red berries. I don't get chocolate, whatever. Listen, man, sometimes I don't either. And obviously, I'm no expert, right? This is just a hobby for me. But really, it's just like, get what you can get. I do think that the nose of a bottle, your ability to pull the things out with your nose or your palate, it varies so much from day to day. Some days I get lots of things. Some days I get less. And today, this one, yes, lots on the nose. This one, not as much. Coming back, there's a little bit of buttered bread, warm bread. And, you're going to get that with all the wheateds. I don't get much oak on it. Oh, and that is a completely different flavor profile. boy, the other one really hit me hard with cherries and oak, and just this one's a little bit more muted. I have to say, it's not shining through as bright. It's just a little bland, I would say. Even it just doesn't have a whole lot on it. Yeah, wow, that's a little disappointing after the first one. There is a little bit of heat. There's a little bit of Kentucky hug on this one, but just mildly so. My taste buds are kind of. This is this is actually the first bourbon I've had in a bit, so maybe a few days. So I am getting that tingle of the palate that you get after your taste buds kind of get a hit of whiskey. I mean, it's sweet. It's easy sipping, but it's just not very complex. I'm not getting a whole lot other than like the typical vanilla kind of. I'm not even getting much caramel, a little bit of oak. It's compared to the first pour, not nearly as good. All right, last one. Now, this one's got a little bit more on the nose than the second. This one, I mean, I'm going to guess this is Maker's Mark because it's just got that familiar weeded funk that I think about when I think about Maker's Mark weeded bourbons. It's got a little bit of that almost musty smell to it that I associate with Maker's. Along with some notes of yeasty, bready kind of stuff, and a touch of oak. And how interesting, this one is almost sour on the palate. Interesting. A little bit of heat, a little bit of spice, but a little bit of oak. Again, much like this number 2, or this A, B, whatever you want to call this middle slot, it's a little more muted compared to our first sip. In terms of just there's some vanilla, there's some caramel, but it's really muted compared to that first sip that we had. And really, like, I don't know which of these I like better, but right off the bat, boy, that is just far and away better. Far and away better. Let's give it just a second. I'm going to go back through the other way. Well, this is definitely a Maker's product. And it's good. It's fine. It doesn't blow my doors off. It's not fantastic. It's a good weeded bourbon. And really, this middle, I'm going back a second time, I'm going to be surprised if these aren't the two Maker's products. They're very similar in flavor profile. And don't get me wrong, I love Maker's products for the most part. I really enjoy the Cask Strength 46. For $40, $39.99, you really can't go wrong with just the Cask Strength Maker's Mark. But boy, I tell you, after having these two, and I'm going to go back for a final sip of that first one, but boy, this is not as close as I thought it would be. Yeah, and boy, just sugar and little bit of cherry. The nose on this one is just really fantastic. And it's going back the other way. This was the first sip of the day. It's not as my taste buds get shot down a little bit by the alcohol. It's less of an explosion of flavor as it was the first time around. But yeah, a ton of cherry off that. Some vanilla, some oak, just a touch of oak. It's really well balanced. It's really complex. Yeah, it's just hands down better than the other two that I'm sipping on. Well, let's just see what we got. Huh. Blue. Red. Well, that's why you do a blind, folks. This here on my left is the Maker's Mark 46. These two, green, the middle one is our Maker's Mark cast strength, and this, the one that I kind of was like, it's really not a whole lot. That's our old Rip Van Winkle 10-year. So, I mean, what a surprise, right? But this is why we do a blind. This is why I blind these things. I'm super surprised that the one that I thought for sure was going to be the old Rip Van Winkle, it's not. It's the Maker's Mark cast strength 46. And the two that I'm like, they're pretty similar. Maybe they're both the Maker's Mark products. No, they were two different products. One was Maker's and one was this old Rip Van Winkle. So, wow. I mean, my hope was that I would do this blind and I would be able to say that, look, stop chasing Buffalo Trace. Stop chasing Buffalo Trace products. Stop chasing Weller and BTAC and certainly, if you're going to chase them for retail prices, not for these incredible markups that you see people pay. And this just it proves what I already thought. It does validate my thinking in that, like, my favorite of these three, far and away, was the Maker's Mark cast strength 46, which is readily available damn near everywhere for $60. So why chase the other stuff? Well, I mean, there you go. Maker's Mark cast strength 46 beats Pappy Van Winkle, or not Pappy, but old Rip Van Winkle 10-year in a just straight up blind. Take that for what you will. If you stuck around this long, thank you for watching. Thanks for supporting our channel. Like, comment, subscribe. Hey, tell me what else you think I should blind this against. Do you want to see it against the old Fitz 17 or the old Fitzgerald 17? Do you want to see it against Weller 107? Do you want to see it against something else that's comparable? Let me know. I'll throw it in. All right, y'all. That's all I got. Like, comment, subscribe, and remember, bourbon is for drinking.